is a new song breaking out from the children of freedom. Every race and every nation, sing it out, sing a new hallelujah. Yeah.
Welcome to weekdaychurch.com. Today we're moving on to what we called last week the spiritual worldview. Now I want you to think theistic. If you get confused on this, this is the view of the world that everything is spiritual, that everything is connected, and the big world religions that talk about this are going to be Hinduism and Buddhism. Buddhism is a really good example of this. So we're going to jump you right into a clip about what is Buddhism with an explanation of that. We'll have some little bit of a talk afterwards to show a very practical way of what this spiritual worldview looks like in the real world. I'll see you right after this video.
What is Buddhism? Buddhism is a religion based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, who lived about 25 centuries ago in what is now Nepal and northeastern India. He came to be called the Buddha, which means awakened one, after he experienced a profound realization of the nature of life, death, and existence. In English, the Buddha was said to be enlightened, although in Sanskrit it is bodhi, meaning awakened. In the remaining years of his life, the Buddha traveled and taught. However, he didn't teach people what he had realized when he became enlightened. Instead, he taught people how to realize enlightenment for themselves. In the centuries following the Buddha's life, Buddhism spread throughout Asia to become one of the dominant religions of the continent. The most common estimate of the number of Buddhists in the world today is 350 million, which makes Buddhism the fourth largest of the world's religions. How is Buddhism distinctive from other religions? Buddhism is so different from other religions that some people question whether it is a religion at all. For example, the central focus of most religions is God or gods, but Buddhism is non-theistic. The Buddha taught that believing in gods was not useful for those seeking to realize enlightenment. Instead of teaching doctrines to be memorized and believed, the Buddha taught how we can realize truth for ourselves. The focus of Buddhism is on practice rather than belief. Basic teachings. The foundation of Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths. The truths are: 1. The truth of suffering, dukkha. 2. The truth of the cause of suffering, samudaya. 3. The truth of the end of suffering, nirodha. 4. The truth of the path that frees us from suffering, magga. By themselves, the truths don't seem like much, but beneath the truths are countless layers of teachings on the nature of existence, the self, life, and death, not to mention suffering. The point is not to just believe in the teachings, but to explore them, understand them, and test them against one's own experience. It is the process of exploring, understanding, testing, and realizing that is Buddhism. Thanks for watching. To learn more, visit about.com.
Okay, so you've seen the clip on what is Buddhism. And did you hear some of the things they said in there? For instance, they said it is a non-theistic religion. I want you to catch, if you missed what that means, it's this: there's no God. So again, it's almost atheism in a way. I told you last week that this spiritualism and this materialism are more connected than they'd ever let on. They almost seem like opposites. When you say that there's no spiritual world and everything's a spiritual world, it seems like they're on opposite ends of the pole. But really what they're saying is there's no God that did all this, and there's no God that did all this. This is not a set of doctrines, it said, but that we realize truths for ourselves, that we see the truth that's in us. Again, both of these are humanistic worldviews. that we are sort of the top of the chain, whether it's that we are the top of the food chain and we are the peak of evolution up to this point, or whether it be that that we are a god almost and have these, and we just need to recognize all this in us. It talked about the Four Noble Truths, and that this world is about suffering, and that there are causes of suffering. I want you to understand this is very much, and I know I keep going back to it, but I think it's the biggest connection that any of us in the Western world can understand of this, or at least that most of us in the Western world can understand of it, is it's a Star Wars theology. There's no God. If you've ever caught that, there's no God. You see them in Star Wars meditating. They aren't praying to a God. There's nothing out there that they are praying to. They are connecting to the Spirit within them, the Spirit within each other. For instance, why in the Eastern world so often do they bow to each other? I am bowing to the Godhood, the Spirit, the connectedness in you, and you are bowing to the same thing in me. That's why it's a bowing to each other, not a bowing of the lesser to the greater idea, but of this idea to each other, of there is this connectedness. Like I said, it's this Star Wars mentality, the Star Wars worldview of everything is connected. But there is no God. It is realizing this potential in yourself, and that there are causes of suffering, and that's what they want the truth they want you to understand in this world. This world is about suffering. People suffer. People go through hard times. The Buddha was a really rich and important guy from a very important rich family, and had given all that up when he saw everyone around him going through such difficulties. He lived before Jesus, and he saw all these difficulties in the world, and he thought, I've got to do something to make a difference. And he studied and he thought about it. He saw the truth that, man, all this life is full of suffering. And what's the cause of this suffering? And again, you would have seen this on Star Wars. The desire to hold on to things. Ownership. Attachment. Again, it's why, like the Jedi couldn't get married. You see, that kind of idea. You don't want to attach to something. You don't want to own things. They didn't own anything to speak of. You drift through this world, because if you don't, then nothing can be taken away from you. And one of the noble truths is that cessation of that suffering that comes from suffering comes from ignorance and from not knowing these truths, and from, there's not a set of doctrines, and it's this growing in it yourself. And as you get there, then you're sort of separate and aloof from this world around you. You stand above it, and you can't be hurt anymore, because this is a world of suffering. But once you rise above that, you're bigger than that. I've never seen that. I've never seen that people can't suffer. I want you to understand that. If you are a Christian, you don't believe that at all, because the very God of this universe, the Bible says, came to suffer and die. And this life has suffering. There is never getting to a point, and you can say, well, maybe he never figured it out. Well, most Buddhists would think that Jesus was a Buddha. He was an incarnation of an enlightened one. One of these that have become awakened, whatever you want to call it, that they say, that the Buddhas were. They would say that there have been different Buddhas for different ages, and that Jesus was the Buddha for his age. And we can learn from him the same as we could learn from Buddha. Well, if he was, and that's what Buddhists would say, is then, he sure suffered a lot. And he was not unattached. He was attached to many things. He might not have married, but he was attached to his people. He loved them. He cared about the Jews and was heartbroken that they didn't accept him. He wanted to see people get saved. He said that he was the only way, the truth, and life. Jesus did not see himself in the same way. He said that we must not be amazed when we suffer, because we are no different than our master who suffered before us. He did not say that there was a way to get above these things. He didn't tell us to detach from the world. He told us to attach to the world. He didn't teach us that there was no God except the God in us. He told us to search for God and to know God and to love God. So you see that there is a very different way of seeing this world. And you say, again, it was one of the fun songs last week, was the Atheist Kids songs. That was a hilarious song. We're going to do some of these this week. Some of the songs that different religions sing. If yesterday it was Imagine by the Beatles, today we're going to sing a song called Climb the Path with Gladness by the Wayfarers. It's a song about Buddhism. and what they teach, I want you to catch. It is a very different worldview than a theistic worldview, especially Christianity, but any of the theistic worldviews. And it's the theistic worldviews, the big three, that we're going to be talking about the last 3 days of this week. The big three theistic worldviews: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. I hope you join us, and I hope you learn to sort of watch carefully on this last song, that there is a difference out there in the world of what we think when we are in a different worldview. Thanks for joining us. Love to see you again the rest of the week. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Climb the path with gladness in the field of life, vanquishing illusion, ignorance and strife. Brotherhood and service shall our motto be, and the goal before us, truth and liberty. We will teach thy Dharma wheresoever we go. Wisdom, love, compassion in our actions show. Wheresoever we go, wisdom, love, compassion in our actions show. We must stand together, fighting side by side. Truth is undivided, this must be our guide. All divisions vanish where the truth is known. This the greatest lesson by Lord Buddha showed. Forward marching ever in the Dharma's might, till we lead the nations into endless light.